Okay guys, welcome back. We're doing phase 2 today of the build series I've got going on. Phase 1 was kind of just going over everything, where to get started, what kind of van or truck you want or bus that you need, and then maybe get going with layouts and things like that. Phase 2 is now we're getting into actual construction type situations. Phase 2 is going to go over rattle trap, which I'm going to be putting up constant feeds of images right here of what I did on my build, and I'll explain everything of when I go into them, so just so you can see what I'm talking about and maybe some other ideas, and I'll throw up some images that I get off of line or off of the Home Depot website or things like that. Why I just wanted to also recap on, I'm doing a 5-part build series on how to build a van your own way and not hiring someone to do that. This is hopefully going to help a lot of people out there that are trying to find out how to do this and maybe live this way or even have it as an adventure vehicle. You've got the van, you've got pretty much a rough layout on what you want, your van or your bus or your truck or whatever it may be. Now you want to start to insulate it. I used, before I even put insulation in, I used stuff that's called rattle trap. I get a lot of questions on what rattle trap is. I bought rattle trap off of Amazon. I'll put a link, all the links in the description will be below. Everything that I've used will be in the description below. Hopefully you guys will figure that out. But rattle trap I bought off Amazon. I don't know if you can get it at Home Depot. I'm assuming you can. It's actually a sound dampener. That's what rattle trap is. A lot of people will use rattle trap when they put like a subwoofer in a trunk of a car to get that extra bass. What it does is it takes the metal and stops it from vibrating. So you peel off the back of the rattle trap and then you stick it onto the metal. Now I've read several different forums that say rattle trap is only good when you cover 25, or you don't need to cover more than 25% of the sheet metal you're trying to sound dampen. So if you cover 100% of the metal that you are dampening the sound to like the vibration of it, anything over 25% is useless. That's why you'll see patches of rattle trap, different sheet metal in my van. I use it over the entire wheel well because it was curved, so I figured, I saw everybody else doing it, pretty much is the only reason why I did it. But it did help. It helped that the sound, you couldn't, while driving, I drove the van empty for quite a while. I noticed obviously there was sounds back here, vibration coming from, you know, various different areas. But once you put that rattle trap in, all that vibration went away. Obviously you can still hear a knock. It doesn't take it away completely, but it does help with sound dampening. I put that on first, and then I went with the floor. The floor is ribbed, and you want to obviously put something in there. You don't have to put something in there. I put something in there. I put that pink foam. Did it make a difference? Probably not. I have no idea. I know people that will cut denim strips, denim insulation, like 1/4-inch denim insulation, and they'll cut strips of it and put it in there, and then they'll lay their insulation on top, or they'll lay a subfloor right on top of that. You can do it that way. I just did it this way. It was a filler for those ribs. That's pretty much what it was. I laid a 1-inch foam board on top of that, and I actually glued that down. I actually put beads of glue on the rib so that it would stick down. When you put your flooring and your floor insulation in, I laid a subfloor right on top of that, and I glued that right on top of the insulation. And then some people put the finished floor on top of that, and they cover the entire floor. I didn't do it that way because I knew that the area underneath my bed I will never see, or even guests will never see. If I open up the back doors, I put a rubber mat down so that my finished floor is only in this area. And people may like, well, it's easier to just build on top of a finished floor. I disagree. Number one, you don't have to buy that much flooring. And number two, if anybody knows how to cut vinyl flooring, because that's what the finished floor is, and we'll go over that in the finish phase. But if you cut the finished floor around the walls, that's what you're supposed to do. Now, if you're not trained in something like that, or you don't know how to do it, I'll go over it in the finishes. You can actually watch that video. Or if you don't feel comfortable doing it that way, then put it all throughout the entire floor and then build over it. My vinyl floor is actually floating, believe it or not. But it doesn't move because it's uptight against all the walls. I personally didn't do it that way. Again, if you want to do it that way, then by all means do it. I laid the subfloor, and then when you're building everything and you're staining things, and I didn't want to put a tarp down to make sure I didn't damage my floor. And I didn't. It was great. I dropped a lot of things on my subfloor, believe it or not. I used, I believe, 1/2 inch, or it's like, you can get a subfloor at Home Depot. I think I used 3 sheets of that. So once you lay the floor down, I started working on the walls and the ceiling insulation. For most of the walls, I used a 2-inch foam board. And then where the bed is, because I will have the little inlets, the small little inlets there, instead of using 2-inch insulation, I used 1 inch where the bed is. Then I used 1 inch on the ceiling as well. So 2 inch on the walls, 1 inch on the floor, 1 inch on the ceiling. The ceiling is tough, by the way, because when you do put the foam board in, you need to obviously hold it up. So you have to have sticks hold it into place until the glue dries or settles, and then you can do the rest. Now that's what I did. I used a foam board. The foam board, I feel, is the middle ground. You can go a little bit cheaper with a denim insulation, or you could use like a fiberglass insulation, which is the pink stuff. You want to consider the R value. Look up what the R value is, because the higher the R value, the better the insulation is. So for instance, in a house, if you live in like the Northeast, which is where I'm from, you're probably going to want to insulate your outside walls at high R value, because the R value dictates on how thick it is and how well it insulates. You want to insulate to where you're going to be most of the time. If you're going to be traveling into the Colorado Rockies or in different mountains, I don't know why I picked the Rockies, but if you're going to be traveling into mountains and very cold weather climates, you may want to think to go a thicker insulation. That's going to really dictate on what type of insulation you have. I use the foam board for the reason I could just glue it into place. That's one of the main things. With the fiberglass or the denim insulation, you can't really glue that into place. You're gonna have to put up strapping, and then it'll tuck it behind them. You can do that, but that's something I'm gonna go into when I get into framing, which is my next phase. You're gonna put strapping in, and then you can put the insulation behind it. That's something if you want to do that, you can look into it. Wait until phase 3, and I talk about strapping and how to get that in there, and I'll show you the ribs and why the strapping matters. But there's a couple different methods I've seen that work. On my next build, probably gonna be an adventure van, I am more than likely going to use the top grade insulation, in my opinion, which is spray foam. Not the spray foam that I use in between. You see that I used a spray foam around foam board. That was just for cracks and crevices. You use that in door jambs and things like that inside of houses. No, I'm not talking about that. That does practically nothing. I'm talking about actual spray foam, and now you can get kits at like a Home Depot, and I'd rather pay for it. It's either 2 times the cost or triple the cost of what I used, and that much more than the fiberglass or the pink stuff or the denim insulation, because it is that good. I did a van tour of Caitlin's van, and she used spray, and it was really, really good. It also saves on inches on the walls. You got to think about that. When you're in a small space, you know, the spray foam goes right up against the wall. You can build right up against that wall. I had to come out a little bit because, well, I used the ribs anyways. I didn't want a wavy wall. I'll get into that next phase. Spray foam is amazing. I definitely will use it. It is triple the cost. It does work wonders. I really want to do it on my next build, because I will probably use it as an adventure van, and I probably will go to the mountains a little bit more. So that's definitely something to consider. A lot of people use them, and I use them. It's called Reflectix, and I'll put an image right there for you. Reflectix are great if used properly. If you actually put Reflectix up against metal or on a surface, the R value drops. I'm not even kidding you. It actually says it right there on the Home Depot website. 1 sheet of Reflectix, then they'll put like a foam board or the insulation, and then they'll put another sheet of Reflectix, and that'll act as a pretty solid barrier of insulation. I just actually used the foam board, and to be honest with you, my van in the wintertime heats up pretty damn well, and in the summertime, when I have the fan going, or if I have an air cooling system, or I have cross ventilation, it's totally fine. I do have a temperature gauge. It does work wonders. No matter what, even if you're in the sun, it doesn't matter if you're in an apartment or a van and you don't have an air conditioning running, it's gonna get up to a pretty hot temperature. I will say Reflectix are great for window coverings to reflect it. Like that's what you'll see like in windshields. You'll see Reflectix on a windshield. That's because the heat comes off of the sun, obviously, hits the window and it magnifies it, but the Reflectix will reflect that sun ray back. So putting Reflectix inside of windows, like for instance, I have them on my back windows. You'll see people use them, using Velcro or metal or magnets, and they'll put them around their window frames, and that'll keep the inside a little bit cooler on those hot days. Reflectix in that manner are definitely probably the best thing to do when you have windows, if you make custom windows. By the way, I'm not going to talk about cutting out windows because I'm not a pro at it, because I didn't do it. I advise you to watch videos on it, watch people doing it. You know, if you are going to do it, just read a lot about it and make sure you're doing it right, because at the end, you are cutting a huge hole in the side of your van. If I do put a window in, it'll go right here where my chalkboard is. The only reason I don't is because I remain stealth. I thought about actually putting like a cool outside picture right there to make it look like it's outside, but it's not. Lastly, in this phase, I want to talk about the roof vent. You want to make sure that whatever you get for solar, which we're going to go over in phase 4, that your roof vent is configured correctly with the rest of your roof system when it comes to where your panels are going to be going. I've seen people use 2 roof vents, which is pretty cool, extra ventilation there. Or you can do 1 roof vent like myself. I put it right in the center practically. It works fine. People always are like, why didn't you put it over where your bed was? Well, guess what? I'm in 96 square feet, 12 by 6. I mean, it really doesn't matter if I move it, you know, 3 feet back, in my personal opinion. I just wanted to have some ventilation, and the roof vent has definitely provided that for me. And absolutely, you want to spend the money on getting a nice fan, whether that's FlowMax or MaxFlow, whatever that's called, or the Fantastic vent. I have a Fantastic. You want to measure it out. By the way, when you order your fan, all the instructions come with it. You can just literally, what we did is I put it on top of the van, and then we drew the template, around the template. Anybody that has done this or is planning on doing it, it's going to be the hardest thing to cut holes inside of your van. So I actually had my dad cut it. He took I believe he took a jigsaw with a metal blade, and he just cut it. Fit like a glove. It was great, and I guarantee you yours will fit as well. Mark it, cut it, put the vent in, put the wires through, bada bing bada boom, you got yourself a pretty cool roof vent. I believe we did my roof vent and solar panels all in the same day. Okay, so thank you for tuning into phase 2. The insulation, the flooring, the rattle trap, the roof vent, and all that stuff. We're kind of getting warmed up here. We're gonna get going, but phase 3 tomorrow is really where it goes crazy. We're gonna go over framing, walls, the wiring, but just the rough wiring, and the plumbing, all tomorrow in phase 3. There's a lot to go on. It's going to be the wiring and the plumbing are going to be rough. It's just kind of putting it in place. You don't put everything together until the end, but it's all going to be in place so you can build around it, and that's why phase 3 is that important. So I will see you tomorrow.